Hi, welcome to Bookmark. I'm your host, Don Noble. Today's guest is author, activist, and Emmy-nominated actor Ameer Baraka. Baraka was raised in the projects in New Orleans in the most difficult circumstances. The family was poor, his father was in prison, and school was hopelessly difficult due to severe and undiagnosed dyslexia. After some rough years in drugs and in prison, Baraka turned his life around and now travels the country educating legislators and health officials on the importance of early identification and treatment of dyslexia. I spoke with Ameer Baraka in Studio UA in the Digital Media Center on the campus of the University of Alabama. Mr. Baraka, it is nice to meet you.
I'm glad to be here.
You, at this point, are thriving. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have testified in front of a Senate committee. You've been nominated for an Emmy for acting. You're a successful. Your acting career is greatly successful, and you've published a memoir. So right now, you're riding high, and here you are at the University of Alabama.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you for taking time out of what I know is going to be a very busy day or two. How long will you be here?
2 days.
2 days. And what will they have you be doing?
We're talking about crime prevention. Myself and
to whom?
To public health students.
Ah.
Yes. So myself, Dr. Peter Scharf, and Chief of Police Eddie Campos. We're talking about crime prevention. And also literacy, dyslexia, all those things that kind of get crime going.
Well, they're all tied in together.
Right, they're all tied in
together. For you, the dyslexia was one of the causations for, well, you tell me, the student in the second, third grade who doesn't read well.
Yes.
That is the start of trouble.
Well, that kid who doesn't read well in the third grade have a 75% chance of not reading well in the ninth grade. And so we know literacy is a big component of crime because we just did a study in the Huntsville Correctional Facility, Senator Bill Cassidy, wife and I, and it was on CBS Morning News, that 53% of the inmates were dyslexic out of 200 male and female. And also the literacy rate was so low, the average person read on a 4th grade level. So our prisons are replete with illiterate people.
And just for our clarification, because we have a Huntsville, Alabama, your Huntsville, where the study was done, was in the Texas prison system.
Yeah, well, that's Louisiana. There's two. There's a Huntsville prison system that was done, a study that was done in Huntsville, Texas as well.
Yes.
And so that's in Texas, and the one in Louisiana is actually called Elaine Hunts Correctional Facility.
Right.
Yeah.
And when they tested inmates, about half of them had severe reading disabilities.
Absolutely.
All right. What I've observed for this cause, the dyslexia cause, the answer is early diagnosis and early treatment?
Absolutely.
When and how do you do that?
Yes, early diagnosis. I mean, there are signs for kids who struggle with dyslexia, early signs. For instance, like the average kid say their first words around 1 year old, all right? But the dyslexic kid, it lingers about 18 months or more. So that's an early detection. Kids who don't know their ABCs, don't know nursery rhymes. All of these are tell signs of dyslexia. So you can be screened for dyslexia as early as the 1st grade.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
and do we know what causes it?
No, it's genetics. It's basically genetics.
Is?
Yeah, it's genetics. And 1 out of 5 suffer from dyslexia. So around the world, 1 in 5 people suffer from dyslexia. But unfortunately, according to Yale Dyslexia and Creativity, Dr. Sally Shaywoods, who I say she's the guru, she's a mentor of mine. She told me once, she said, Ameer, we've been doing a study, and I truly believe that African Americans are disproportionately impacted by dyslexia. It may be 50%. And so at that time, I didn't want to digest that because I was saying to myself, I was naive. I was saying, well, that's labeling blacks as being incapable of learning to read. But as I begin to study this thing and look at it from a different lens, I saw where sickle cell anemia impacts African Americans more than any other race.
Well, yeah.
And so I was saying, okay, well, maybe this is true, because when you think about the slave times, how creative African Americans were in that time, and they had no access to learning, and yet they were creative, they were talented, they were building new things, and they didn't have the tools. So I started leaning towards that. And if you see, the dyslexics they're big in entertainment. They're athletes.
I saw a list.
So,
I saw a list with photos. Tom Cruise and everybody
Tom
else.
Cruise, Richard Branson,
Yes, right.
Bill Gates,
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, and the list goes on. Sidney Poitier.
All right. Let me ask you a parallel question. All the names that we just put out are males. What is the relationship between dyslexia and gender?
It doesn't just. There's
It's the same for women?
Same for women. Same for women. So that little beautiful girl that you see that's hiding in the shadows in the classroom, she sometimes gets away because she's beautiful or she's quiet. But what happens is, I know in my case, and particularly with the boys that I've come in contact with, they act out, because it's very difficult to sit into a classroom and you can't compete. You can't compete. So it makes it very uncomfortable for you to be there.
If you feel bad and I think it can't be page 6 in your book where you say, school became so frustrating, the only way I could get through was to cheat.
Yeah.
And as soon as you start down that road, there's going to be trouble ahead. If you can't succeed straightforwardly, then there's just going to be more and more difficulty coming along.
Absolutely. So I had 2 other siblings, my brother and my sister, who actually did very well, grew up in the projects and went to college. Yeah. Extremely smart, extremely smart. I come from a generation on my father's side, people are highly educated, believe in education, PhD people, masters. So they're very educated people. But I didn't have the capability at that time of building my phonological pathways, and so I just didn't have that knack. But I had other talents.
When did you get diagnosed?
While I was in prison.
Who did it? How did it get done?
It was a GED teacher. He knew when you come into the prison, it was about 35 of us who came into the prison, and only one of us had a high school diploma. There was one guy on that bus had a high school diploma. The other guys, I fell into it. I was 23 years old. I was reading on the 3rd grade level. There were some guys who was reading on the 4th grade level, 5th grade level. So we all were very, very poor readers. And you're talking about men at this time. I was 23.
Yeah.
So you had guys that were men. And I wanted to learn because I knew that if I didn't get a handle on this, I was going to be a repeated offender, because education is your pathway out of poverty. And I knew that. I heard that so many times, but that word education scared me, and I didn't have the capabilities. Yeah. So a teacher who's a white guy, he enjoyed teaching. And he realized that I was reading on the 3rd grade level because he saw my test scores. And I told him that I want to learn to read. And he said, Ameer, if you want to learn to read, you have to sit in front of the class. Because all the guys who just...
You were sitting in the back row.
I was kind of sitting in the back row.
To the front row.
Right, because you don't want to be embarrassed, right?
That's right.
So all the guys who really was trying to escape the field, because in Louisiana we have fields, and so you go out into the hot sun to work if you don't choose school. So I chose school not to avoid the field, but I chose school because for once in my lifetime I wanted to try to learn how to read. And so he had a lady come in, and they talked about dyslexia, and I never heard that word. You know, for years my mother said some really horrible things towards me because I couldn't compete, and I was acting out. I was called dumb and stupid. Sit your dumb self down. Why can't you be like your brothers and your sisters? And so I heard that, and so it further pushed me down the rabbit hole. And so when I heard the word dyslexia, after I was screened, I called my mother up, and first thing I thought about, first of all, I thought about maybe maybe I was crazy, because dyslexia really sounds like an ugly word.
Sounds like a mental
Yeah, it sounds like a
illness,
mental
doesn't it?
disorder, doesn't
Yes,
it?
right.
It does
Well, it
sound like
sort
a
of
mental
does,
disorder.
yeah.
So it kind of validated what my mother had said, but when I went on to discuss, when he went on to discuss what it was, I kind of felt good about myself. And I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, I called up on the phone, I'm like, Mom, I'm not dumb. I'm not stupid. I have dyslexia. And I knew very little about it, but many people had it, and it was something that you could overcome. And so what I did for 4 years while in prison, I wrote down every word I didn't know: that, though, tomorrow, yesterday, and every word that I didn't know. And I made a pursuit to learn to read, and it took me 4 years to attain my GED.
That is the hard way.
That's the hard way. That's the hard way.
That is the hard way. Phonics.
Yeah.
It has its own problems, but it's a lot easier than
but
one word at a time.
I got that remediation about a year and a half ago. It was a guy that, when I testified before the United States Senate on it, a guy accosted me and he said, Amir, I want to teach you to read. I said, no, I know how to read. He said, no, you don't know how to read. You know how to memorize words. And I went through his training for 15 months. I didn't know that you said, I didn't know sounds. I didn't know any of my sounds. I didn't know any of my sounds. And so I said to myself, had someone given me this in the second or third, fourth grade, I'd have never gone to prison.
Your education system, the elementary school system in Calliope, is that right?
The Calliope Project.
Yeah, it's the pronunciations in New Orleans are a riot, you know.
Yeah.
Chartres, and Calliope is Calliope. But if you're not from there and nobody tells you, you'll never get it right.
Right.
But the education system let you down, the projects let you down, and painful as this is, your dad let you down. And
Absolutely.
One of the things that happens in your book, and as you move along telling your own life story, you return many times to fatherhood, to the role of the father. Mm-hmm. And dyslexia is a terrible, crippling disadvantage, but the father business seems to be almost as important.
Oh, it's no doubt about it. My father was very derelict in his duty in leaving his children behind to pursue his heroin addiction, leaving my mother, a young mother, alone to fend for herself, and thank God for my grandmother. But the father is the role model. The father is the one that teaches you values. The father is the one that shows you how to treat a woman. The father is the one that shows you everything.
And it wasn't just, I mean, the thing that's so striking, and your story, but other people, I mean, it's an odd story. It's singular to you, but it's not the only story like that. I mean, America has 10,000 stories that are similar to this.
Right.
There were no fathers in the projects.
It was not a one. There was not one dad, one father, but one.
All right.
But one. His name was Big Man. He was a guy that lived in our project, but he was a stepfather. He was a stepfather, and he used to sell watermelons. And he showed me how to work. I would work on the weekends with him, cutting grass and selling watermelons. But outside of that, I never went into a household and saw a man in the household.
All right. Now, using a kind of parallel thinking here, dyslexia is a real problem. It can be identified.
Yes.
And it can be treated.
Yes, it can be.
Lack of males in the culture is a real problem. Easy to identify. They're not there. And I was intrigued. How do you fix that? Where's the answer to reorganizing parenthood? Well, you can reorganize dyslexia.
Absolutely. Well, you can definitely reorganize parenthood. I go into prisons across the country, and I ask men, I said, how many men in here have children? Yeah. And 90% of them raise their hand.
Right.
And I tell them point blank, I'm very blunt, shame on you. Shame on you that you were selfish enough to leave your children behind. You committed a crime and you didn't think about your children. Yeah. Shame on you. Now some other man could be there raising your kids or molesting your daughter.
There is.
So we have to hold men accountable. I'm a big person at being accountable, taking
the stepfather and the boyfriend in your book. Not one, several.
Yeah.
The stepfathers molest their stepdaughters, and the boyfriends occasionally. Yeah. Occasionally, because the biological father is absent.
Right. Right.
Leaving this possibility open for all this mischief, all this trouble.
Yeah, it's like this. You ever seen a lion and a lioness, right, in the cubs, right? every so often that lion has to fight for the protection of the lioness and his cubs.
Yep.
Because if the other lion comes in and beat him, right, the other lion comes in and killed the cubs because he wants his own cubs.
Yeah.
And so when a man leaves his household for any reason, you leave your cubs susceptible to danger in most cases. And so
you
this
are
problem is
perfectly
ubiquitous.
right.
Yeah, this problem is a huge problem. Huge problem in the culture.
And one of the things in American culture that we never get away from, it is with us every minute, is money. I don't know if what would I say? I was tickled. I was amused. I was astounded. You were 14 years old. You became a first-day drug dealer, and you made $1,000 in an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
And then when you were in the 11th grade, in your bedroom, you had $40,000 that you had accumulated.
Yes.
When a kid, a poor kid especially, gets a hold of that much money all at once, it just perverts the whole system.
Yeah, it does. It does. What I want to say is this to people out there, particularly in the African American community, because I hear it so much that black people have in poverty, that's why they're selling drugs. Being in poverty does not make you commit crime. Let's get that straight. It's poor morals and poor values and distorted thinking. I know a lot of people. There's a female that I know, her name is Dr. Hadia Green. She lives in Atlanta, grew up in abject poverty. Now she's a physicist. And so poverty didn't make her be a prostitute or sell drugs. No, poverty pushed her to be educated. So that's what poverty does. We've gotten away from that because the African American, at one time, we valued education. That was our way out of poverty. But we have now gotten to the area of the fast money. Everybody wants fast money through entertainment, football, basketball, and all that stuff is good. And we can't, another thing, we can't allow these people, in every other culture, you don't see black people, you don't see whites, Jews, Spanish people looking to entertainers to lead them. But in our culture, we do, right?
Oh, yeah.
We have to value the educated and not people who shake their butts or people who rap or people who catch a ball, in which that's good. But I more or less, I've divorced myself from that way of thinking. I value people who are educated.
I think, I agree totally. Yes. I think the idea of either athletes or entertainers as necessarily cultural role models is just really looking for trouble.
Absolutely. LeBron James is not the role model to black people. I want to say that. He's not a role model to black people.
Right.
No, he isn't.
There's an element in your book. Dyslexia is certainly important. The fatherhood is certainly important.
Absolutely.
And the generation of proper values is certainly important. But right along with values, one of the things that interested me in your book was faith.
Oh, yeah.
As a child, I don't think you were much involved with the church. Doesn't seem in your story.
Yeah.
And then, where in your maturation, was it before prison, in prison, after prison? Where did religion, and the religion is Christianity essentially?
Yes.
Is it laced with a kind of Islam?
No,
it's not.
Not at all.
Well, tell me.
I follow Yeshua, the teachings of Yeshua the Christ. My grandmother was a very religious person. She had a relationship with Christ, and she talked to us about the Lord. But being a young boy, I deviated from that because I had no idea that God was in the business of helping you along. I just thought that you serve God when you die. When you die, you go to heaven. That kind of thing. But when I got to prison, when I got incarcerated the first time, I saw where so many men were getting so much time, 80 years, 50 years. And I said, oh my God, I'm like, God, if you're real, I need your help. And I'll never forget, I took my Bible and I put it on the floor in the cell. And I said, God, I'm standing on your word. If I ever get out of here, I'll never sell drugs again. I'll help people. I'll never do anything wrong. And I stood on, the Bible, they talk about standing on faith, standing on the word of God.
You did.
And I literally stood on the Bible. I took the Bible, put it on the ground, and stood on it. I fasted for 7 days. And God worked a miracle for me. I was a guilty man. I was charged with selling 5 ounces, quarter kilo cocaine, and I had those drugs. The police officers were not lying on me. They caught me red-handed, but God had a ram in the bush. There was a lady that worked in sewage and water board with my mother, And she was a juror. I picked her in a juror. I had no knowledge that she was there. And she fought for me like hell. She told me, I got the opportunity to meet her years later, and she said, Ameer, they wanted to sentence you to 60 years. But she said, I fought for you. She convinced the other jurors to give me a second chance. And I took that second chance, man, and it's been years from then. I've never gone back to prison. I've been faithful to my commitment, been in 30 films, spoke before the United States Senate, been on Oprah. I've been so involved in the prison system of helping men rehabilitate. I talk about there's no prison reform without education reform, because when you put a man in prison, he needs to have a skill. He or she needs to have a skilled. So I'm very proactive regarding that. And as you know, I'm part of the First Step Act. Now it's required in the federal penal system that every inmate that comes through the penal system be screened for dyslexia and remediated.
Let's branch out a little bit about rehabilitation among the incarcerated. Education is, I mean, I'm a professional educator, so I'm for it.
Yes.
But there are other avenues. What if you could prescribe and you could manage to get the funds organized, what would you have prisoners, what would you teach them? Not book learning so much, but what ought to happen so that the recidivism rate just drops? What would you have them learn? What skills? What jobs? What?
First and foremost, you have to rebuild that man. You have to teach that man how to think. It's the first thing, because we don't teach people how to think. So you have to get rid of those antisocial values and get that man to start thinking and believing in pro-social values and embrace that, right? And then you have to give him a skilled brick mason.
That's
plumbing.
That's what I'm talking
air
about.
conditioning, refrigeration.
Yeah.
So you need these components inside the prison system, because imagine if you or I go to prison for 5 years and I have nothing to do. In 5 years, you can master being a plumber in 5 years. You come out with your certificate. Right. Now you're making $25 an hour. You go straight and get your job or start your own business. But it's funny, because the prison system, they don't want to allow that because it's privatized. So imagine if you had a hotel. The objective is to keep that hotel at full capacity. And so I will not educate you because I need you to come back. I need you to come back. In prisons, some prison systems, they do like 15, 20% of the appliances throughout this country, right? So imagine people are building refrigerators, they're doing building furniture at 7 and 8 cents an hour. I can be a multi-millionaire. I could be a if you and
They're using the prison labor.
Absolutely.
But are the prisoners learning the skills?
No, they don't have them in there.
Right.
I mean, for the inmates that are doing that, I think it's slavery, it's slave labor, because you're not giving them a huge incentive at all. But that's what needs to be.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
in the feds.
Avenues that are not intellectual avenues, avenues that are not essentially reading and studying.
But let's talk about intellectual, right? Because I've met men who taught themselves different languages in prison.
Yeah.
Very smart guys. I've met some guys in prison that
right.
know the law backwards and forward. They got many men out because they came into the gift. I know a guy that couldn't read when he came to prison, became a great lawyer. Boy, you have some brilliant minds in prison.
Oh, no, without question. I don't think the IQ is the issue.
Yeah.
It's and let me. We only have actually 3 or 4 minutes left. But let me ask you a question. This is not a philosophy seminar, but here's the question. Part of your book is about environmental forces. What happens to a kid? You have the genetic force, like dyslexia. Right. You have the environment. You have a lack of parenting. You have a culture in the projects that's really, really hard to overcome.
Yeah.
And then you have in your book a very powerful voice for choosing free will, self-control.
Yes.
All right, I'm not trying to make trouble here.
No.
But how do you reconcile, and you've done this in your head, you've reconciled the forces from without with the power of will from within.
Right.
How does it work?
Well, how does it work is that the thing is that I can't hold a kid that's 14, 15 years old responsible for that, right?
Okay.
Because when you're a child, you think as a child. When you become a man, you think as a man. So it takes time because the front lobe of the brain does not develop in the boy until he's 27 years old. Up until then, he's going to make a lot of mistakes, but you have to catch it fast. So you have to really embrace the fact, if you want to, that, hey, you know what? If someone else did this, I could do it. So you have to start changing your value. You have to take the initiative to change your own pathway.
How do you go into a project, talk to a bunch of 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and get them to change their attitudes? How do you do it?
Well, I've been fortunate enough.
You do it,
right,
I know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, the reason why I chose to be an actor is because entertainers are the gods of this world. If you are an entertainer, you can get the attention of anybody. Secondly, if you've been to prison, you can get the attention of young black boys because that's something they can relate to.
Okay.
And from you've been in the hood, right? They can relate to that. So I use that platform and say, listen, man, the information that was given to me while living in this project was completely erroneous. A man does not beat his woman. A man does not kill. This is not your turf. The federal government owns this property. You don't own anything but yourself, right? You have to change your values.
Yeah.
Education is the only way out for you. Look at me. I did it. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. I tell them my story. And I said, listen, that same power is within you. The kingdom of God lives in you, in every man. You have the ability to change.
It's a very interesting circle that you've created. You have the authority of the incarcerated. You have the authority of the celebrity, and you're using it to try to get the kid who doesn't have any power to exercise his power.
Yes.
Mr. Baraka, this has been a pleasure. We are out of time.
We're out of time.
But it has been a joy. Thank you for coming in.
Also, I would like the people to know to support my Dyslexic Awareness Foundation. It's the dyslexicawarenessfoundation.org.
Yes.
They could give to them, give there to help kids, because we do a reading program as well with kids in the community, and that's what we're doing, investing in kids.
It's done, and we will put it on the screen.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.